So hello, and a very warm welcome from the Yale Alumni Educators for the second session of our series, Learning in the Age of Climate Change. My name is Claudia Portogallo, and I'm a co-founder of the Yale Alumni Educators. We're a tight-knit community of educators and students dedicated to unlocking potential, fostering critical thinking, and nurturing mutual responsibilities. Our series is co-sponsored by Yale Blue Green and the Yale International Alliance and hosted by the Yale Alumni Association. We are grateful for the support and connection we fostered with these shared interest groups across Yale and beyond. We are especially grateful for the untiring support of Magda Vergara and Modesta Matos-Gooding in setting up this conversation. For today's episode, Empowering Learners and Educators in the Face of Climate Change, Climate Disasters, Climate Change, Maggie Favretti and I have invited you to bring your questions for building regenerative community projects locally. During our conversation, Maggie will explore how to overcome feelings of immobilization, overwhelm, and uncertainty instead of enabling connection and impactful community action. At the end of our conversation, you will get a chance to leave your contact details to partake in a future design lab hosted by Maggie. Maggie conspires with younger learners and colleagues from around the world to democratize and deepen learning and to build agency for caring, transformative, systemic change-making. In her new book, Learning in the Age of Climate Disasters, Empowering Teachers and Students Beyond Future Phobia, Maggie outlines the contexts and causes of future phobia and then offers regenerative learning strategies rooted in nature's principles for repair and redesign. She also explores methods for co-empowering youth creativity, agency, and hope. Maggie's next steps include Earth and Indigenous rights advocacy in helping to further global healing through emancipatory and regenerative learning and civic action ecosystems. She plans to keep asking, what kind of ancestor will I be? So our conversation today, I want to frame with three quotes. One from a text that was published 5 years ago by Daniel Christian Wahl on Medium called Creating a Regenerative Culture. What lies behind, the quote goes as follows: what lies ahead of us is the promise of a truly regenerative, collaborative, just, peaceful, and equitable human civilization that flourishes and thrives in its diverse cultural and artistic expressions while restoring ecosystems and regenerating resilience locally and globally. Antonio Guterres, during the opening remarks at the UN Climate Summit instead in July, said the following: climate change is here. It is terrifying, and it is just the beginning. The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived. The air is unbreathable, the heat is unbearable, and the level of fossil fuel profits and climate inaction is unacceptable. Leaders must lead, no more hesitancy, no more excuses, no more waiting for others to move first. There's simply no more time for that. It is still possible to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius and avoid the very worst of climate change, but only with dramatic, immediate climate action. This urgency, we all feel it. And in order to turn into action, I want to go back to a quote by Daniel Christian Wahl, which will then settle us into the mindset of possibilities, co-creation, and collaboration. The creation of diverse, regenerative cultures, collaboratively united in a regenerative civilization is the only viable future open to us as we move into the planetary era. Our collective challenge is to create cultures capable of continuous learning in the face of complexity, not knowing, and constant change. We have the creative opportunity to give birth to a human culture that is mature enough to express the insight that life creates conditions conducive to life in all its designs, systems, and processes. We can co-create a world that works for all of humanity and all of life. We are capable of vibrant and diverse cultural expressions of the profoundly transformative insight that We are the eyes of the world. Maggie has experienced how transforming co-creating regenerative learning landscapes can be for everyone who has lived through traumatic climate disasters, enlivening. And so I'm going to hand the conversation over to Maggie. Thank you for taking us on your journey today.
Thank you for inviting me. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today and those who will take the time to view the recording. Just for my helpers here, I can't see the participants. So hopefully people are here and ready to go. Once I start sharing my screen, I also will not be able to see the chat. So you will hopefully help me with keeping track of all of that. So without further ado, let's dive into some pictures and see where we can go together. Well, a few people were able to use the map. Let me just hide these controls here so they don't block everything that we're trying to do. So we can see that we are at least from 2 continents and perhaps more as we move along. And so I wanted just to say welcome and to emphasize again that I feel like we are all in this together and that we can come back from the edge and learn again what it means to be human among all our relations. So I want to tell you today about what I call the positive civic action cycle. And I'm sure that you recognize this picture. A student of mine drew this from a YouTube artist's How to Draw Figures. And the student selected this and gave it to me because he thought it represented so well what I mean when I talk about disengagement because of complexity and overwhelm. Some of us may have seen this in our classrooms or looking at our children when they're doing their homework. I think it also reflects the way that young people look in school a lot, far too much, because I think our typical schooling models are not engaging. They are not engaging for a number of reasons that we will be addressing during this talk. But most importantly, they contribute to a sense of powerlessness. So this climate emotions wheel helps us to understand how complex and potentially overwhelming our emotions can be, particularly with regard to climate change and climate impacts and climate risk. This one is made by the Climate Mental Health Network. You can see there's a link there, there's a QR code there. So when you have time, definitely go and take a look at their resources. And what I'm going to be focusing on is powerlessness and how that contributes to all the intensity of all of these emotions and the difficulty of bearing them and carrying them. If we feel that we have the power to change our situation, then it can help us to address these more intense and trying emotions. If we feel like we have the power to build hope, to exercise our compassion, to inspire others, and to build a sense of positivity, then again, the roots of that are in our power. And so we want to take a close look at how we can build up our power. And the first thing that I want to emphasize is that it's not just us. It's not just me feeling that all of these big feelings. This is a collective moment. And our collective trauma, in many cases, these collective feelings that we are sharing are really not only due to our powerlessness, where complex issues like climate change, existential issues like climate change are facing us. In fact, the backdrop to all of this is injustice and inequality in the world, because that's the primary thing that contributes to our inability to change the situation that we are in, whether we are in a society that marginalizes us for any number of our identities, whether we are economically in a situation that's difficult to live with, whether we are racially or ethnically marginalized because of our gender or our gender fluidity. All of these are issues that can lead to powerlessness. And when powerlessness is added to climate change and to all of these powerful emotions, it becomes a potentially traumatic situation, and our brains protect us, just as our brains are wired to help us to survive. Our brain protects us from these overwhelming feelings and helps us to disengage. And so by disengaging, we are actually keeping ourselves safe. But this disengagement is also a step toward exhaustion, because it's exhausting to disengage, all the while being aware that we are in a very threatening situation. Sometimes that exhaustion leads to fatalism and the sense that there simply is no way out. There are no other options. This is definitely going to happen. And this is one of the many contributing factors to the steep increase in suicidality among young people. In certain demographic groups, that rise is hundreds of percentage points. In the United States, if we take a look at indigenous groups, that's where I'm talking about those numbers. In other cases, it's tens of percentage points, like 20 or 70 or 80% increases in suicide attempts, in increases in the number of people ending up in emergency rooms, in the number of drug overdoses, which could be said to be linked to this sense of powerlessness and fatalism, inability to change our own situation. And one of the new terms that I am introducing, which is not totally new, because future phobia is a condition that's in the psychological books, but what we're doing is looking at it through the lens of climate and climate impacts on health and mental health. And so in conversation with a number of psychologists and community psychologists, because after all, this is a collective experience that we are in, we were really considering how you add together all those emotions, powerlessness, and climate impacts, and how that affects people's mental health. And one of the things that seems to be ubiquitous is the effort not to think about the future. And that effort, it's almost like a fear of thinking about the future, bundled into the anticipatory stress of thinking about what future might bring, or whether the future exists for us at all. And so I call this future phobia, and in my book talk more in depth about it. Claudia, in that wonderful introduction, emphasized the sense of urgency that we're all feeling, that there's really no time left, that the changes that we're talking about, big, systemic, complex changes, have to happen yesterday. And when we start to get this feeling, right, I know I start to feel kind of short of breath, and my palms start to sweat, and I start to talk faster. And I have to really remind myself that I need to slow down. And slowing down isn't just a function of moving more slowly through the world. It is a kind of essential deepening of awareness. And it comes from paying attention, and really paying attention to where we are, who we're here with, how we're related. It helps us to slow down. I know when we were just talking about this presentation today, and people were saying, well, I'm nervous. And I said, I really don't feel nervous, because I don't feel alone. I teach this. Some of you may know about the US Coast Guard, and among their many missions, one of the critical missions that they attend to is saving people in disasters, usually climate disasters near the coast, which means flooding and hurricanes. And so in this exercise, the young man who's blindfolded is the only one who's allowed to touch the cards, and his teammates have to communicate with him in such a way that he can interpret and understand and act. So that means slowly, not all at once. And he has to remain calm because this tower that he's building will very easily collapse. And so they are all having to pay attention. They're having to attend to each other, and they're having to move through this slowly to increase the sense of urgency in the background. Every card they add to their tower is a family saved. And then, of course, we reflect on how it went and what it means. And of course, our best teacher in all of this is nature. Because as my students working in a community garden were fond of quoting me, saying, you can't cause a plant to grow faster or bigger by telling it to grow faster or bigger, by yelling at it, by giving it a bad grade. We have to consider that there is a pace of life, and we need to be aware of that and to align ourselves with it. So I wanted us to just stop for a moment. I'm going to have to take some technical steps here because I want to play you some music to help put us in the right frame of mind. But I wanted us to just breathe together. And you can breathe in any way you want to. Some people have breathing exercises that they do, but concentrate on breathing and consider as we do that, that we're all doing that together. No matter where we are, no matter what continent we're on, all of us are breathing together. Plants breathe, animals breathe, fishes and insects breathe. We are all breathing. And that act of breathing is a constant reminder that we are alive together, that we're breathing the same air the dinosaurs breathed, that we are all part of this universe and interrelated with this universe together. So you can start breathing. I'll start the music. So I wanted to have us have that opportunity. Can everyone hear me now?
I can hear you, and I believe everyone else can do too.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanting to make sure that nothing went sideways with the technology while we were having that wonderful moment of collective breathing and thinking about how we are connected and how we're all connected. We can scientifically prove this, but I don't need to now. I think that breathing and opening ourselves up with music connects us to our bodies in ways that enable us to feel our feelings and also to connect with our own creativity and our own sources of compassion and life. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen much in school. I mean, my students used to request, "Can we do our breathing?" when they came to class. The first couple times I did it, they thought it was funny, but then they came to really love it, and it was an opportunity for them to reconnect to their bodies and to themselves and to each other. And so I want to draw attention here on this slide to another person whom I look up to in this world of regenerative learning, and that's Rachel Musson and her organization ThoughtBox. She actually created this slide, and I owe a lot to her thinking, and we think through many of these things together. But if you are looking for a good platform where you can connect with other teachers who are looking for resources to use in a transformation toward regenerative learning, and really ways to heal ourselves and heal together with each other and the rest of nature, ThoughtBox would be one place to go. And the point that she's making and the point that I'm making here is that humanity, not everyone, but many of us are suffering from chronic disconnection. And we need to think about the ways that our schools are contributing to that, the ways that our lifestyles, like our cell phone use and social media, are contributing to disconnection, and to the ways in which our thinking has become disconnected, so that we think in silos. Are we in a science class? Are we in a math class? Are we in a language class, history? And we can't let our thoughts mix. And so this is, of course, creating a kind of incoherence and unease and ill health in our lives. And of course, it leads to a sense that we're in this all by ourselves, and that it's just way too difficult to manage all of this. So it's just easier to disengage and not think about it. School is a very future-focused place. So it's exhausting to try not thinking about your future while all the while you are in school. So I wanted to draw attention to another thing that power that nature has given us, and that's the power of shared purpose. Because when we are acting collectively, when we're helping each other, it actually feels good. So I wanted to stop and have us take a little bit of a poll, so that you could see what it looks like when others are listing their feelings about working with others to make a positive difference. So I think if we can go to this link, if you go to this link, either using the link or the QR code, then we should be able to see this building. Let's see. Oh, we have some responses there already. I think the new ones will take a little while to come in. Takes a little bit to update. submit one word at a time. Maybe two. Hopefully this will load.
Do you have a way to reload the page? Otherwise, maybe we can follow the link in the chat. I put,
There we go.
there we go. Thank you.
Oh, look at that. I'll update it one more time. See if we can pick up any more. And not only do we feel all of these feelings that you listed, but our brain is generating those chemicals, those hormones that make us feel good. The reason why we feel all these feelings when we're collaborating, when we're working together, is also because our brains are releasing the same chemicals that we feel when we are in love, and that when we are being loved. And so it leads me to this question: would you do that kind of thing again? And of course, we're hardwired to collaborate. We want to keep doing it because it feels good. And that's the essence of the positive civic action cycle. Because once we have one of these experiences, once we do work with others to make a positive difference, we want to do it again. We want to reconstruct those feelings and repeat those feelings over and over and over again. So in order to make it available for our students and for our young people to work together this way as a form of healing, as a form of building well-being and resilience, we need to provide as many opportunities as we can to do that in school. School is one of the most powerful levers we have for shifting culture, because it's one of the few institutions, perhaps the only one, that touches everyone in the community. And it's a great opportunity to bring people of all ages together. And so when people of all ages are working together, and this is something we have to consider, since many of our schools also disconnect people by age or by abilities, the feelings that we feel are even stronger when we're working together with various types of people, people from different perspectives, people from different ages, people with different abilities. And it allows us to reconnect to the power of being human when we slow down, when we reconnect, when we work together on something we care about. It reminds us that resilience is relational. And there's a lot of talk in schools about how we can teach individual children to be resilient. And being resilient is something that we aim toward. But I want you to just repeat, resilience is relational. We are only as resilient as our relationships are healthy. And so I want us to think a little bit about healthy, I'm sorry, let me back up just a second. The most resilient systems in the world are the ones that have been around and evolving, tested and evolving for 3.5 billion years. Those are healthy, natural ecosystems. There's nothing as resilient as a healthy, natural ecosystem. And it's resilient because of the relationships within. So some of you may know what mycelium is. So mycelium is the fungal network underground that isn't just sitting there, right? It's actually communicating, it's actually nourishing, it's actually connecting species in relationship with each other. If we did not have mycelium, we would not have life. So at the root of life is relational resilience embodied by mycelium. And so in my book, I've mentioned in the preface of the book that when we're faced with extinction, we need to be teaching closer to the roots of life. When we are faced with powerlessness, we need to be teaching agency and shared purpose. And what happens in school is that everything is fragmented and taken apart, even though we have the sense, even as young children, that it's all supposed to fit together and that there's supposed to be a place for me in all of this. We take it apart. And I think it's a function of Western philosophy and Western thinking about education. And it goes back, the divisions among subjects in our schools goes back to the Committee of 10 in the early 1890s. This is in the United States, where Andrew Carnegie led the charge to develop Carnegie units. And a Carnegie unit is simply the number of minutes that a person sits in a particular subject area class. So in the state of New York, for example, you have to have 200 minutes in each Carnegie division, each subject area. And those are called credits. So if you have a certain number of credits, then you can get a diploma. Our universities are set up the same way. And the way that Carnegie enticed the universities to do this was by offering health insurance for the faculty and staff of any university that divided its learning into departments. And this is now TIAA CREF in the United States. People will recognize that. And you can carry that with you from university to university as you move along. But the big question, like even in second and third grade, when kids are starting to have stomach aches and not wanting to go to school, part of that is because everything's being pulled apart. Even in their elementary school class day, they get pulled out of their class to go do a science activity, or they get pulled out of their class to go to art. And all of a sudden, they're starting to feel more and more out of control and uneasy because everything's being pulled apart. So I wonder if we consider what would happen if, instead of thinking about nodes that we know are interconnected and maybe the students will figure out how to reconnect someday, what if we stopped thinking about, turned off the lights on the nodes, on the separate subjects, and instead turned on the lights on relationships? What would school look like then? So again, focusing on relationships, what we want you to do now is to think a little bit about who or what do you feel connected to in the beyond human world. When humans talk about relationships, very often they think of their human relationships. And in fact, that should be the primary ones we think about, because we are the expressions of our experiences and the relationships that we have with our families and our communities. However, our relationships go way beyond that, because probably we have also felt a moving of the spirit when we look at a beautiful scene in nature, or we see a sunset or a sunrise, when we see certain animals. I know for my part, every time I see a whale in person, I start crying. And I don't know why. I just know that it's a very moving relationship that I have there. So this is a question asking you to think about your relationships beyond your human ones that are actually connecting you to the world. I love the spider in the corner. In my ancestry, spiders are considered good luck. Maybe I jumped in too fast.
I think you can reload one more time. There should be more responses now
Do
visible.
I reload it just by clicking on it?
How did you do it the last time?
I just clicked on it.
Okay. I don't know how to do that. Let me get the results link in the chat so people
Okay,
can see
great.
the results.
Thanks.
Maggie, can you see the results?
Nope.
No. So I'll just read. Water and trees are really big. The spider in the corner, particles and waves, dolphins, the moon, clouds. My piano and music, foxes, technology, dogs, owls, canyon, cats, grass, fire, elephants, whales, plants, soil, sunlight, motion of the sun, rocks,
I love it.
horses, ants. Yeah.
One of my favorite responses ever was when a student added all of the organisms in my gut. And
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that's a connection we don't often think about.
Yeah.
But that's a constant reminder as we're feeling hungry or as we are having trouble with our digestion, right?
Yeah.
That we are actually full of other beings who are helping us to be alive in relation with us all of the time. And of course, we can learn from them, right? They're sending us messages. We have too much of this kind of bacteria, so we're having crampy in our guts. And we are surrounded by natural learning guides. So many of you identified relationships with natural things, and even the things that we don't think of as natural, like our piano. Certainly, it's made of nature. Everything that human beings manufacture initially comes from nature. Nature gives us everything. And nature can also teach us. So we've already talked a little bit about mycelium and how it's such a great teacher of relationship and how we are all interconnected, and this is how we thrive. And when we are all interconnected, as these tree roots are, with other trees, with the other organisms all around them, communicating danger to other trees, fostering the life of other trees, it makes us think, you know, if we stick together, it'll be very hard to knock us down. It's hard to knock down a forest, much easier to blow down one tree. We can also learn lessons from hawks. Hawks are birds of prey who have incredible eyesight. I live near the water, and so we have what are also called fish hawks or osprey, and they can see below the surface of the water so that they can focus in on their prey and zoom down and get it. So hawks, for me, are teaching us both about how to pull back, to see how things are related, to see how things fit together, to see what we need to focus on, and then to focus in on that with laser-like precision. I think we can learn from bees too, who spend a tremendous amount of time, really lifetimes, gathering. And they're gathering pollen with which to make honey. That act in and of itself is a relational act because they are assisting in the reproduction of plants, and they are at the very basis of our life. We can't live without them. We can't live without plants. But what they do is this process of gathering, which is very much like learning. And then I find myself frequently in my otter mind and learning from otters about flexibility, because they can squeeze themselves through all kinds of shapes, and they move very fluidly through the water. But they are also great teachers, and they work together a lot to teach through play. And they're multi-generational living. They live in families and in clans, and they will fight for something that they love. And so they are fierce protectors of each other. They're fierce protectors of their territory, but they love to have fun. And so I think we can learn from them as we think about how is nature not only providing us with everything we need, but also teaching us how to use it. And then, of course, I have human learning guides as well. And so here are some of the people. We'll be sending you a list of resources at the along with the recording. And all of these people have contributed to the conversation that we're having today in some way. Resmaa Menahem is the leading voice in collective trauma and collective trauma healing. There are others, but he's written books on racial healing that are really important for thinking about trauma. So many children, especially in US and US territories, are feeling traumatized by birth. And he's really the go-to person for that. Joe Rice is the founder of the Phillips Indian Education Center, which is one of the earliest attempts it's now been around for decades, and it's one of the earliest attempts to bring together Indigenous ways of knowing and learning and see where they overlap. Because there are so many different ones, as you can see from his hockey emblem on his hat, he lives in the upper Midwest, and he works on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, which is primarily Lakota people, though he is himself Choctaw. Rosaura Renga Oguayo, she is one of the leading voices in disaster psychology and disaster recovery. So she's also linked to climate psychology networks. And I'll put some links in the chat there. She was interviewed recently by Dr. Vivek Murthy, who is the US Surgeon General, on her guide to climate psychology first aid, or psychological first aid. Pamela Silva Diaz, she is along with Rosaura and Eduardo, they are all Puerto Rican scholars. Pamela is an engineer, and she engages communities in community co-design. We worked on that together, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. Leslie Davenport is also the author of climate, what's it called? Emotional Resilience in the Age of Climate Change. Dr. Lugo, climate psychologist. Lori Peak, founder of the Natural Hazard Center. And Ayana Verdi, the founder of Verdi Eco School, an urban eco school. Most of my work in empowering youth has happened in the form of design labs, where there is a challenge facing them. And in Puerto Rico, after the double hurricanes, the design labs that we were doing there were helping students to believe that they have a future. My favorite quote from the design labs that leads us to think again about teaching agency and power is this: after the hurricanes, I couldn't speak. All I could do was draw. I just drew and drew. Design lab has given me my voice back. Now I know I have ideas that can help. And Resmaa Menahem tells us that trauma results from the powerlessness to prevent harm. climate change has the potential to do great harm. And so we have to pay attention to empowering others. In Puerto Rico, after the double hurricanes, there were 5 projects that I was involved with, all of which were empowering to the students who engaged with them. Some of them had to do with communities taking climate action together, like Simposio Co-Creando in multi-age groups. Others were a specific group like Impacto Juventud, which is a collegiate group founded by Dr. Eduardo Lugo. And they work with communities to affect justice and change. Aula en la Montaña is a self-created community school, also a project guided by Dr. Eduardo Lugo, and so on. In the process of all of this, we learned that it was very important for communities and young people to have a process for dealing with complexity that was theirs, that they had co-created, that worked culturally in their communities, but would help them to bridge the gaps and build relationships with each other because they could stay focused on the challenge at hand. And all of this, the reason why it's regenerative is because it all is based on what nature teaches us about living systems. So design and change and empowerment, this is all about how do we change the systems that are harming us now so as to make us more resilient in the future. And this is why climate justice and climate resilience go hand in hand. And when we think about healthy living ecosystems, they have these inseparable and interrelated characteristics. So every being in the system is interrelated, and all the systems are interrelated in an infinite web of life. Living systems are regenerative. In other words, they're always creating the conditions for more life. In the case of a learning ecosystem, a healthy learning ecosystem, what conditions can we create for more learning? And how does the learning itself create conditions for more learning? And how is the learning ecosystem also contributing to life? We notice that healthy living ecosystems are very diverse, and biodiversity is essential for life. And so we need that in our schools too. So we need to stop separating people by age, ability. We need to bring as many different perspectives from different kinds of communities together as we possibly can. Living systems are coherent. That means that everything is valuable and valued and needed, and it has a place, and that place makes sense, and how it works makes sense. They're continually evolving and changing. And they're diffuse. And what I mean by that is that there's no outside agent that is directing how the ecosystem functions. The ecosystem has co-evolved into a relationship of power that is diffuse and spread out. So there are some foundational species that are absolutely essential, but really, if you removed any species from a healthy living ecosystem, the ecosystem would have to recover from that blow. So I wanted you to think for a moment about how our school systems or our learning ecosystems might reflect those characteristics. Sir Ken Robinson, in reflecting on this, says, well, yes, we need to focus on culture the same way that sustainable farmers focus on the soil. If you get the culture right, everything else takes care of itself. But let's think about these for a moment and think about how this might affect our school cultures, how it might affect our priorities. And I'm wondering if people can maybe put into the chat. I think I'm going to stop the presentation just for a moment so we see what people put into the chat. How would priorities be different? Oh, now I can see in the chat. I'm gonna have to look at the chat later. There's so much interesting stuff going on. Yes, Emily, thank you. Keep adding. How would priorities be different in your school or your learning ecosystems or your communities if learning ecosystems were based on living ecosystems? Yes, we'd redefine success, right, Allison? We would be thinking that success is the well-being of the whole, which defines success for living ecosystems. Thank you, Claudia. It would likely prioritize relationships, and that would emphasize systems. Yes. Yes, I think so.
And Carolyn just added, instead of preparing students to get into a good college, we would be preparing the students to work together to build a livable future. And Mike just said, our private school would teach about educational inequity in the wider society and encourage students to use their privileges to dismantle systems of inequity and injustice.
Thank you very much for reading those out. Wow, really valuable and powerful contributions there. In some of the design labs that I have led with teachers on this, the points that you made have come up, and here are some of them. That we would let nature lead our learning. We would deepen our learning by doing, instead of being cut off from nature and from life in concrete boxes. And we would probably base our learning ecosystems on the challenges that are facing our communities. And what would happen if we did that? What if we thought about the challenges that are confronting our communities having to do with water, or having to do with land and food, or having to do with housing and the concept of home? And maybe at the root of it all, being human and what that means among all of our relations. So when students came to school, they didn't necessarily come to a building. Maybe they came to a place where people are farming or building homes or working on commissions to establish greater justice in housing, or trying to address an issue of an abandoned home or an abandoned lot in a community. Learning about the oceans, engaging in regenerative ocean agriculture, aquaculture. Or community resilience. I got into this work by asking that question. What if our learning ecosystem was set up to teach community resilience? To understand what that is. Of course, every community defines it differently. One of the things that emerges is a sense of belonging. And this quote I'll let you read. The Haas Institute is an institute that studies belonging, and John Powell leads it. And so this ongoing spiral of belonging and agency begins to, you can see how it begins to contribute to well-being. Being seen and heard, being needed, being trusted, leads to our sense of power and agency and self-efficacy. And then we can go on, right? Then we have hope because we know that we're not in this alone, that we're working together. And we find that when we're engaged in authentic community activities that are addressing challenges or meeting challenges facing our communities, that we develop a sense of place, belonging. We begin to know ourselves better. We understand that we're relevant. We feel a deeper sense of meaning to our lives when we're motivated by compassion or by purpose to engage in our societies. And then, of course, once we learn that we can affect change, there's really no stopping us. When the positive civic action cycle begins to kick in, people will seek that out just as they seek out loving relationships to engage over and over again in it. And that gives us a sense of the future, that we know there are opportunities or we can create them. And so these essential elements of emotional well-being continue to feed each other and to make us more resilient than we might otherwise be. And so the job of school then is to uncover the resilience capacity that the students in the community has. And in the process, hone their skills and hone our understanding of the justice that comes when we begin to ask the question, who holds the power of design? And the power of design is really the power of change. And holding the power of change is really what makes us resilient. And this is something that's done together, right? So I use the word community in here. It could be students at the university or the school level, K-12 school level. When we think of being designed by, how can we have our students participate much more fully in creating their own educational journeys? And in doing so, also learning all of these skills critical for life. None of which, by the way, are tested on standardized tests. And then again, to return to the concept that you need to have a process, that it isn't fair to ask anyone to work together with others to solve or address community challenges without also having an agreed upon acceptable, culturally relevant process in order to do that. Regenerative co-design moves the needle to the side of designed by, so that engineers like Pamela Silva Diaz, she facilitates the engagement of the community to unlock or to tap into the power, the talent, the knowledge, the ancient wisdom that they already have. And that happens mostly in the gathering section, but the act of going through this process together unleashes and ties together and weaves together in this relationship a very, very solid community, inter-community relation, intra-community and inter-community relationships that become, like mycelium, very, very supportive of thriving, even in challenging times. I just want to show you some examples of what it looks like. And then we will, I'm not actually sure whether we're over time already or whether we have 90 minutes. I forgot.
We have 60 minutes.
Oh, okay, so we're over time already. So just showing you some very quick examples of what it might look like. And this is what gives us hope, right? The courage to keep going is civic action. There are a lot of schools that do this already in the world, that think about learning ecosystems as a landscape with many pathways that you can go through together. I think you can just barely see a herd of sheep there, or goats. And it's an opportunity to simplify our curricula. Some schools are using the Sustainable Development Goals in order to do that, and then implanting them in community and place-based, challenge-based learning. So if you are interested in continuing and maybe working together in a future design lab, there's a form here that you can fill out. And here's also a link to purchase the book if you are interested in that. And there's a discount code. So you'll get all this in the recording along with the resource list. Let me go back to the form. So should I stay here or should I just say thank you for coming, everyone?
I think we're going to stop the recording now and then make time for some questions.
Okay.
Okay.